Let's move on to the other focus that we have here, the growing drug menace in our country and the conversation that's been taking place around it. The focus tonight for me, viewers, is going to be if our approach is correct, or if our approach to crack down on this growing drug menace is more focused on grabbing headlines than actually choking the supply and catching the culprits. Now, there was much conversation and a mega crackdown linked to Bollywood that took place after Sushant Singh Rajput's death. Several people were even arrested. But that case has yet to go anywhere significantly in terms of cracking down the big guys, the big fish that is actually supplying all of that drugs to the entire nexus. Again, there was a lot of noise that was generated over the weekend when a luxury cruise party was actually busted, where drugs were found again. This cruise which goes between Mumbai and Goa. The party was on. The NCP officials landed on that place, about 1,800 people there. They detained 8 people. Allegedly, some of them are drug peddlers, others are consumers of drugs like MDMA and ecstasy and cocaine were seized, though in small quantities from the point of view of consumption, one would assume. One of them was, of course, also Shah Rukh's son, and which is why it has become such a big story. But I want to talk about the real core issue, because you would know and you would remember we did this as a big story just a few days ago when a massive drug bust took place at the Mundra port just last month, where the authorities found 3,000 kgs of heroin. 8 people were arrested. This 3,000 kgs of heroin was worth thousands of crores of rupees. That was a significant drug bust. That was the action that shows you the large quantities and the large scale consignments that are actually on the move. Now, can we bust a teenager's party and manage to get to these guys? Because this would be, I assume, the ulterior motive of any anti-drugs agency or the Narcotics Control Bureau in our country. Before this, a narco-terror group was busted in Jammu and Kashmir in Uri, where also they found drugs weighing 25 to 30 kg worth about 20-25 crore rupees. And there have been similar other instances in the last few years. So the debate really tonight is our focus headline-grabbing raids and not the real menace? Are we able to identify the big source, the giant smuggling networks, those who are sending in thousands and thousands of kgs of cocaine and heroin, those who are minting money off it, targeting the youngsters and feeding them these drugs? To me, that is the real menace. Dr. Deepak Raheja, Director and Chief Psychiatrist at Hope Care India, joins me this evening. Umakant Mishra, former Assistant Director of NCB, with us this evening, and Najib Shah, former DG for DRI, the Director of Revenue Intelligence, with me this evening as well. Let me start off with Mr. Shah to give us a sense of it. Mr. Shah, would it be correct to say that the menace of drugs, and especially drugs like cocaine and heroin and all the other new forms that have come in, has actually increased, and that India is now becoming actually one of those hubs for an international circuit?
For having me. Yes, at the outset, one would have to admit, going by the seizures, which have become very frequent and of high quantities, that there is a growing concern of the drug problem increasing in India. The last survey done by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment in 2018 suggested that there is a serious problem of opioids, of cannabis, of a whole range of intoxicants. So we do have an issue. And having said that, remember, India, by virtue of its geographical location, is also a favored transit route for drugs coming in from the Golden Crescent, which is Afghanistan, Iran area, geographical area, and also Golden Triangle, which is Myanmar, Laos, Thailand. So we have a geographical contiguity with these two regions, both of which are major poppy cultivating areas in the globe. And we have an active precursor chemical industry in India, which is essential for distilling opium into heroin. So there is a problem in the country right now. But the extent of the problem, I think our other panelists here will be in a better position to tell, who's from the ministry. I do believe, going by the seizures, we do have a concern, and a growing concern at that.
Yes, Mr. Umakant Mashra, good evening to you. Going by the recent seizures, I mean, that visual itself that we had from the port, where we saw these cans and cans of heroin with some talc on top and then heroin inside, 3,000 kgs. To me, it's an alarming figure. But what is your sense of if the menace is actually growing?
I hope the question is for me.
Yes, it is, Mr. Mishra.
I think I'm losing your video, but I think the present seizures in and around has much to do with the present Afghanistan situation. What really has happened is that since 2020, the Doha agreement between USA and Taliban has made things a little bit different. You see, once that agreement has come, the enforcement of the eradication, of the cultivation eradication in Afghanistan and all these has slowed down. And now suddenly, after the Taliban came into power, the whole socio-economic situation has gone horrid. So what has happened is that because the enforcement efforts to eradicate those opium cultivation and the processing of heroin around the Menace belt, around the Afghanistan-Pakistan border has slowed down, it led to a lot of stockpiling. So when it led to a lot of stockpile, a lot of drugs are available. And now the situation is that even you will also remember that the erstwhile Taliban, who were actually controlling the opium cultivation and the heroin processing and trading and protection and all that, they are part of the government now. So what has happened is even inside the government, there are factions. Ahmed used to control the Afghanistan-Pakistan route, the trafficking route. The Haqqanis were controlling in the Kalandar belt, opium belt. So what has happened is that there is a glut of heroin available. So that has to go somewhere. So it is and the other thing is that the economic situation. You know the economic situation in Pakistan. It is a very complex strategic issue. So that is why you will find even the LOC seizure. You see, India is closer to Afghanistan through LOC. Mm-hmm. So there has to be pressure on every point, the LOC point and the other points also. You will find that there are seizures, a lot of seizures in the maritime routes also, along the Bangladesh and along the Sri Lankan coast. I predict that there will be a lot of seizures in those belts also. As regards this comparison between the multi-kilogram, multi-thousand grams and seizure and the undue publicity to the Aryan Khan issue and all that,
yes.
they are part of the same coin. You see, either we start from top to bottom, like we see 3,000 kilos which would have been distributed right to people like Aryan Khan, or you approach the problem from down under, from the consumption level, the addict, and then you slowly go up. Because the coverage has to be 360 degree, whatever. It may be enforcement, it may be health issue, it may be treatment, rehabilitation, whatever you say.
Okay. So, Mr. Mishra, this was exactly what I was going to ask you, and I'm glad you addressed it. And your view is that the approach has to be both. You have to, approach from the top and the bottom as well. Whichever way it helps to crack down on the overall system. My concern, though, becomes when we only focus on the, low-hanging fruits, the headline-grabbing stories, the Bollywood connection, the, kids of stars connection, but actually forget about the larger story. And the larger story is not just about where it's coming from and who's pushing it, Dr. Deepak Raheja, but it's also how easily they're targeting the youngsters. It's I mean, Aryan is a celebrity's son, so his face is plastered all over the TV screens. But there is a larger problem of how easily they are able to target the youngsters and sell them these drugs.
So I totally agree with you. The issue has to be dealt, like Mr. Mishra said, in a 360 manner, top down and bottom up. But I think what really attracts a young adolescent or a youngster to drug use, apart from many other factors, including peer pressure, so on and so forth. But the underlying principle being the instant gratification, and as is the instant gratification so palpable in this young kid, I think it's equally palpable in society at large, where the need to make money, where all morals, all consciousness, all answerability to self just goes away, and within the rubric, the fabric of society, we have a drug that is so easily available. So the same drug was transported into a vessel, into the cruise. I mean, there are so many loopholes to it. If we look, I mean, the fact there's 3,000 kilogram of heroin that we are talking about that was seized in the port at Gujarat. The drugs are available, and I think it is the responsibility of the society. I think just trying to brush the leaves and to try and look at the micro and macro view, where I think the crackdown needs to also begin by spelling out that there should be actually in any society a zero tolerance towards availability and of course the usage, but just cracking the usage, trying to catch some celebrity kid uh, who's probably also a victim of temptation and circumstances. And if we want to put all the responsibility of this temptation on this young kid or a few young children, I think we are shutting our eyes, blinding ourselves to the larger greed or the larger need of instant gratification, or the money, or the big mafia, which is like a cartel. And you can see and imagine the amount of money involved, which I think just continues to complicate the society. So I think it has to be multifold, and I think we need to have a very strong concerted effort where professionals have a role to play, the policing agencies have a role to play, the media has a role to play. It has to be education, it has to be curtailing the use, but it also has to be very strict implementation of the law, both for the user, the provider, the peddler. I think the issue is sociological, it is psychological, it encompasses very strongly the monitoring agencies and the policing agencies.
Okay, yeah, very well said. Thank you so much for highlighting these aspects to it. So let me take it back to our experts as well, and to Mr. Najib Shah this question. Mr. Najib Shah, is there a concern that we are lacking behind in this game of catch up with the criminals, where they're coming up with newer methods of moving these drugs around, and the authorities may not be equipped enough to update and upgrade themselves with those tools?
Look, going by the sheer number and frequency of seizures, I would suggest that that's not correct. You have had seizures by the BSF on the Indo-Pak border. You have had seizures in Delhi by the Delhi police. You have had seizures off the coast of Tuticorin in Sri Lanka. You have had seizures in the port of Lavasheva. You have had this big haul in Mundra itself. As a follow-up, again, there have been cases in Noida. So last year and this year, coming until this October, has been a very, very fruitful year for all the enforcement agencies. I think they're getting their act together. And the Taliban situation obviously is a matter of concern. They are squeezed for finance, while there can be no justification for peddling drugs. The fact of the matter remains is that Taliban now is not getting any support from the IMF. It has got massive amount of heroin and opium lying around. The market, the bigger market for them is through the Balkan route and Tajikistan towards Western Europe. India is a smaller market for them. India, we always have believed, was more a transit to offset and deflect attention of the agencies in other countries. I think that continues to be the case. And there is a growing concern of the market in India also because of all the reasons which the good doctor has mentioned just now. So you have a problem. The enforcement agencies have to get their act together, and they're doing a wonderful job, in my opinion. It is extremely challenging when it comes to the sea route, when it comes to containers. We have a policy of trusting our importers to declare correctly. Everything is based on intelligence, on data analytics, and this 3,000 kgs is a wonderful example of all moving parts coming into conjunction and resulting in the detection. So I think they have done a good job, but they cannot afford to rest on their laurels simply because the problem is only going to increase.
Yes, the problem is so grave, and in fact, we did have this conversation about the Taliban challenge, because obviously they need money. They're going to use drugs as much as they can to push and get that money, and that becomes a big challenge for us being in the neighborhood itself. Let me go back to Mr. Umakant Mishra. We can now see you as well as hear you, so it's good to have the connection going again, Mr. Mishra. What is your response to this, criticism that comes about that the NCB seems to be focusing more on the headline-grabbing actions, going after stars from Tollywood, Bollywood, or whichever other, a regional or national film circuit, or their stars, but are not actually looking at the key, which is the large size consignments, the big smugglers, the big peddlers?
I will start with the lighter side. You see, Bollywood believes in sequels. Whatever is successful, sequel 1, sequel 2, sequel 3. So you see, the LCVs are the compulsory because it has been a kind of a sequel to the Riya Chakravarti case when the focus started. So they can't stop it midway. You see, as far as the targeting of big distributors of big seizures are concerned, the results are before you. A series of cases since 2017. I remember in 2017 also, there was a very big seizure of 1,500 kilos in Gujarat coast. So right from that 2017 is important because in that year there was a glut, there was a huge increase in opium cultivation in that Golden Crescent area. So right from that time, the stockpile of the opium and the heroin are happening there. But coming back to this, you see what is happening is big things are happening and they are also being targeted. Small things are happening, they are also being targeted. What I mean to say here is that NCB has a lot of, the NDPS Act has a lot of teeth. It takes care of all the situations, both at the consumption level by treating them softly and at the much more larger distribution level by treating it more harshly. The question is that if you ask me what is my opinion about this Aryan Khan affair, yes, I'm very sad that young people are going astray. It may be experimentation, or it may be recreation, or it may be rebellion, or it may be self-discovery, whatever you may say. The socio-cultural fabric has broken, like the Dutch Sabbath say. You see, our culture emphasized on a perfect balance between mind, body, and soul. That is completely broken down. Now we are depending on the body, only body. We are not even controlling our mind. And that is what is being transmitted to the children. So what is happening now, I'm really sad that this is happening. But happening to people like Aryan Khan, I think it is a lesson to the society. Because somebody asked me today, why the big seizures are not being taken up by news agencies, or why BRI or agencies like NCB are not coming more into news.
Yes.
So I explained to them, you see, intelligence agencies always stay behind. Investigative agencies like CBI and all that, they are always in the news. Because intelligence agencies work quietly.
So you're saying the work is happening, it's just not making it to news. The stories like Mundra port seizures are actually taking place. We're just not reporting about it?
No, not reporting is not the case. The empathy.
Right.
You see, the time, the TRP and everything is linked to this. Because if somebody is, you see, the DG NCB, yesterday I was listening to him, we are not concerned. If somebody is there in this perimeter of the law, we have to deal. It doesn't matter who he is or what he is, because you have to deal with it.
Okay.
One side of the story that he will say that you have caught him because he is son of a big man. No, it doesn't happen like that. Once you have an information, you are duty bound to act. If you don't act, you will be prosecuted. The officer will be prosecuted.
So as long
There
as
is a
you're able to
provision like that in the
use whoever you've caught with drugs on them to actually track down their peddlers or distributors and their suppliers, and then get the big fish in the net.
That's what I'm trying to emphasize.
Yes.
You catch 13 grams of cocaine from somebody. Say, of course, that is more than small quantity, but let's say 21 grams of hashish. So if you go to his distributor, at any point of time, you will again find 150 grams or 200 grams of hashish. Again, it will be a small quantity. So it is a question of a natural progression. Either you start from below and step by step you catch 1 kilo, 10 kilo, 50 kilo, 100 kilo. That is also a process.
Right.
And then you target the big fish and catch 300 kilos, 500 kilos, 1500 kilos, 3000 kilos. That is also a process. But everything is between the perimeter of the law.
Okay, fair enough. Completely out of time. Thank you so much to all three of our panelists for joining me on this conversation. And the larger point that our experts are also telling you is that there is a big challenge. And the drug menace challenge for India just got a lot bigger because of the change in rule in Afghanistan. One of the biggest countries when it comes to drug smuggling and export. And they are going to push it. For us, it means that our authorities, our DRI, our NCB, our customs, all of them need to be on high alert at the input points, the ports via which these drugs are being smuggled. We need to be extra alert about the big distributors that thrive in this country and move these giant-sized consignments. Most of the big drug busts that have happened in the last 3 years have shown an international racket. People connected to each other across 6-7 nations, and the drug consignment really moving across these nations. That's the larger challenge. Yes, the headline grabbing ones may be Bollywood parties and the stars who get caught in this net. But the question we should be asking is, why is it the children of the stars are so easily getting access to these drugs? And how do we choke that supply? Completely out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.